The story begins with two men sailing on a small boat along a river between the mountains. Standing quietly on the boat, our protagonist narrowed his eyes and thought that it had been a long journey. The scene then shifted to the past. Inside the clan palace, chaos filled the area. Our protagonist struggled while being held back by a man with tears in his eyes. In front of them was the aftermath of his mother's death. His father stood with his back turned and coldly ordered everyone to stop causing a scene and leave immediately. He also ordered that the incident must never be spoken of outside the clan. Hearing those words, our protagonist was shocked. His father then declared that from that day onward, the Bakley clan would not seek revenge. Unable to understand, our protagonist demanded an explanation while trying to break free. His father replied that everything was being done for the sake of the clan and warned him not to recklessly pursue revenge. Furious, our protagonist shouted that his father could not even avenge his own wife or speak against those responsible. In his anger, he declared that his father was not worthy of being called a man. Sometime later, our protagonist decided to leave the clan. He realized he was still too weak to take revenge. As he ran away from the Bakley clan, he vowed to grow stronger, establish his own sect, gather followers, and build enough power to punish everyone involved in his mother's death, including those who stayed silent. Even if it took decades, he intended to make them pay. 12 years passed. Inside a burning sect building, a middle-aged man desperately begged for mercy. He tried to negotiate, offering anything our protagonist wanted, and even suggesting he could persuade the Murim Alliance as well. Now fully grown, our protagonist stood calmly with long black hair and a bloodied, broken sword in his hand. He ignored the man's pleas and quietly stared at the damaged blade. The man continued shouting, insisting that his offer was reasonable. Our protagonist finally answered that there was indeed something he wanted. The man immediately became hopeful and asked what it was. Our protagonist laughed lightly and answered that he wanted the man's life. The man became irritated and warned him to stop joking around. In response, our protagonist calmly raised his broken sword and said that if the man would not hand it over willingly, he would simply take it himself. Enraged, the man threatened to tear him apart. In the next moment, our protagonist suddenly appeared behind him and remarked that the man's mouth was as filthy as his face. He struck the man in the back with his fist, sending him crashing through the floor and creating a crater below. Our protagonist quietly watched the crater with a bored expression. Suddenly, the man leaped out from behind him and attempted another attack, shouting that he would send our protagonist's head to the Murim Alliance. Without panic, our protagonist drew his sword and cleanly sliced the man in half from head to toe. Afterward, he walked through the burning building and opened the main gate while still holding the bloodied sword. Outside, a brown-haired girl named Moyong Hyong greeted him while carrying a scroll. She explained that she had been told to deliver it once the task was complete. Although his face was covered in blood, our protagonist smiled brightly as he accepted the scroll and thanked her for waiting. Moyong awkwardly suggested that he wipe the blood off his face first. Our protagonist opened the scroll and read through it. After finishing, he used the blood on his face to write something onto the document with his fingers. While looking at the scroll, he smiled to himself and wondered whether this was truly the end or perhaps a new beginning. He then tossed the scroll back to Moyong and told her to deliver it to the Murim Alliance because he was retiring. Moyong asked whether he planned to return to his hometown. He replied that he had already accomplished everything he wanted within the alliance. She then asked if she could visit him someday after retiring as well. Our protagonist agreed and joked that she should come find him if she ever became bored. When she asked where she could find him, he turned back with a smile and answered, Hubei Province, Hualong County. The scene shifted back to the present. Still sailing on the river, our protagonist reflected on the past 12 years. After leaving his clan, he had joined the Murim Alliance and developed his own martial arts. Through his achievements, he eventually rose to the rank of captain. Now, at last, the time had come to establish his own sect. He had saved enough money to buy a manor, and the perfect property had recently gone up for sale. Holding a pouch of money, he grinned happily and laughed to himself. Pointing toward the sky, he loudly declared that even the heavens seemed to be helping him. The middle-aged boat peddler awkwardly laughed and wondered if he had picked up a crazy passenger. Our protagonist quickly apologized for getting carried away. He explained that he was on his way to complete the purchase of a manor for the sect he had always dreamed of creating. The peddler asked whether he was a young sect leader. While rowing the boat, he quietly muttered to himself that there was only one manor available nearby, and wondered if it was the rumored haunted property. Noticing the muttering, our protagonist asked what he had said. The peddler brushed it off and simply wished for the future Sect to prosper safely. Adjusting his straw hat, our protagonist thanked him confidently and remarked that all that remained was signing the contract. Soon after, the scene shifted to the manor itself. The moment he saw the condition of the place, our protagonist froze in disbelief. The seller, Yiriang, proudly spread his arms and described the manor as spacious and grand. Our protagonist immediately grabbed Yiriang by the clothes and accused him of attempting to scam him. Panicking, Yiriang insisted that the property had been extremely difficult to obtain and begged him to look around before making a decision. After calming down, our protagonist entered the manor with him. Inside, the place was covered in dust and clearly abandoned for a very long time. While walking through the grounds, Yiriang explained that the manor contained 45 rooms spread across the main and side buildings, along with 5 training halls, including 1 large hall. Curious, our protagonist asked which sect had originally owned such a place. Yiriang admitted he did not know because the manor was ancient, though he insisted it would become an excellent sect headquarters after some repairs. Although our protagonist agreed, he sensed there was a hidden problem and directly asked what was wrong with the place. Yiriang crossed his arms and admitted that every previous owner had mysteriously died from sudden heart failure on the very first night after purchasing the manor. Because of this, rumors spread that the place was haunted. Even bodyguards and exorcists had failed to prevent the deaths. Hearing this, our protagonist stared at him threateningly and asked if he was seriously trying to sell him such a property. Sweating heavily, Yiriang quickly explained that this was exactly why he was selling it for 1/10 of its normal value. The moment our protagonist heard the price, his attitude completely changed. Laughing cheerfully, he grabbed Yiriang's hand and handed him the payment pouch, saying he had almost misunderstood his intentions. Tears streamed down Yiriang's face as he accepted the money and handed over the deed, praising him as expected of a captain from the Murim Alliance. Our protagonist accepted the deed with satisfaction. At that moment, a strange system notification suddenly appeared before his eyes, stating that the deed had been received. Our protagonist froze in shock as his body trembled slightly. Yiriang noticed his reaction and asked what was wrong, but our protagonist dismissed it as nothing. Afterward, Yiriang left while joking that if our protagonist survived a single night there, he should come visit him again. Once alone, our protagonist shut the doors and shouted excitedly that he finally owned his very own manor. The sudden loud voice frightened the people outside, causing them to run away in fear. Overjoyed, he slapped one of the pillars while laughing and declared that all he needed now were disciples. Dust immediately scattered everywhere from the impact. Covering his mouth, he realized he should probably clean the manor first. He then began cleaning the entire place at high speed. He wiped the floors, cleaned the ceilings, polished the pillars, and carried buckets of water through the halls until only the main hall remained. Satisfied, he opened the doors to the main hall and prepared to finish the last bit of cleaning. Inside the room, however, he noticed a long sword placed in the center. Curious, he approached it and wondered if the previous owner had left it behind. Thinking it might sell for a decent price, he smiled and began unsheathing the sword. The instant he drew it, his eyes widened. The room suddenly transformed into a battle simulation. Confused, our protagonist looked around as a system notification appeared before him. It identified him as the evaluatee, stated that the objective was sect establishment, and displayed his overall grade as 2nd grade, while noting that he held the highest rank among all evaluators. Still confused, he questioned what was happening. Suddenly, a small metal orb shot past him at tremendous speed. Although he barely avoided it by leaning backward, it still grazed his face and cut several strands of hair. Fully alert now, he unsheathed the sword completely and looked toward the small crater created by the orb. Another notification appeared, announcing that the test difficulty was being adjusted. Recalling Yiriang's explanation, our protagonist realized that this was likely what had killed the previous owners. As he pieced things together, a cannon emerged from the wall of the simulation chamber. The system announced the beginning of the test and labeled the difficulty as extreme. Our protagonist drew his sword confidently and accepted the challenge head-on. Another notification identified the trial as the test of martial prowess. Immediately afterward, the cannons began firing steel orbs toward him. Our protagonist moved rapidly through the room, dodging and slicing apart every incoming attack, while proudly declaring that he would show why he had once served as a captain of the Murim Alliance. After a long exchange, the firing briefly stopped. Looking down, he realized his sword had been severely damaged. Before he could react further, the attacks resumed, forcing him to barely dodge another barrage. Sliding outside the cannon's firing range, he noticed the attack stop and concluded that the area beyond the wall was safe. While resting briefly, he observed that his sword was close to breaking. Suddenly, another sword appeared before him. Surprised, he picked it up and realized the system was providing replacements. Carefully studying the battlefield, he noticed that the cannons were protecting something on the opposite side of the room. He immediately rushed forward. The moment he neared the center, multiple additional cannons emerged from the walls and opened fire simultaneously. Caught off guard, our protagonist rapidly sliced apart the incoming steel orbs while continuing to advance. Eventually, his sword shattered in half. Angered, he struck directly at the cannons, creating a massive explosion that filled the room with debris. At that moment, he activated his martial techniques, flowing Moon Stride and Phantom Field. Energy surrounded his blade as he rushed through the center of the room and unleashed Crescent Slash. He drove the sword into the floor with tremendous force. The recoil pushed him backward, and the sword shattered completely. Immediately afterward, the simulation collapsed. Our protagonist returned to the original room inside the manor. Still crouched from the impact, he slowly stood up while gripping the remains of the broken sword. Thinking the attack was not over yet, he prepared himself for more steel orbs. However, the broken sword suddenly disappeared from his hands. A system notification then announced that the test had concluded. Looking around, our protagonist noticed that the manor itself now appeared restored and much newer than before. Exhausted, he sat down on the floor. Another notification appeared, informing him that he had passed the test of martial prowess and that all manor functions had been unlocked at their highest grade. Soon after, a sword surrounded by a blue aura floated before him. Surprised, our protagonist wondered if the system was rewarding him with a weapon. He stood up, grabbed the sword by its hilt, and remarked that after everything he had gone through, the reward was only fair. Another blue notification then appeared, explaining that the trial would conclude once he named the manor. Our protagonist looked at the message and commented that now it wanted him to choose a name as well. Closing his eyes briefly, he smiled and declared that he had already decided. Placing one hand on his waist, he confidently announced the name of his sect, the Righteous Heavens Sect. The system immediately confirmed the registration of the manor under that name. At the same time, a white symbol appeared imprinted on his hand. As the system continued its announcements, our protagonist sheathed his sword in irritation and demanded that whatever ghost or spirit lived inside the manor should reveal itself already. Instead, another system notification appeared before him. Initializing the Sect system. Seeing the message, our protagonist stared in shock. Someone hurried down the long corridor before Beakley Woon forcefully pushed open the door to Yang's room. Yang, who had been calmly writing inside, looked up in confusion and tried asking if something had happened the previous night. Before he could finish, Beakley Woon grabbed him by the collar and angrily demanded an explanation about the strange thing following him since last night. According to the contract, only the buyer was supposed to see it, yet this unknown system notification kept appearing beside him. When Beakley Woon pointed at it in frustration, Yang could only stare blankly because he could not see anything at all. He wondered if Beakley Woon had injured his head somehow. Exhausted and irritated, Beakley Woon eventually dropped into a chair while muttering curses under his breath. Yang casually suggested taking the estate back if it bothered him that much, but Beakley Woon immediately refused since he still needed the estate. Hearing that, Yang reminded him that he should focus on preparing for the Sect founding ceremony, because there would be plenty of work ahead. Beakley Woon then explained that he wanted around 20 sets of ritual robes made and asked if there was a good fabric shop nearby. Yang said he could recommend a few places, though making deals would not be easy because most merchants were trying to connect themselves with Dragon Hall. Seeing Beakley Woon's confusion, Yang explained that Dragon Hall was a powerful trading guild that had supplied fabrics to the imperial court for generations. Their influence across the martial world was enormous, and even major sects avoided offending them. He also joked that fabrics from Dragon Hall were far beyond Beakley Woon's budget anyway. Though embarrassed, Beakley Woon admitted it was true. Yang then added that merchants might refuse to trade because rumors had already spread that the estate was haunted. He advised Beakley Woon to simply visit the fabric district himself. At that moment, the strange system notification beside them reacted as if offended by being called ghosts or devils. Annoyed, Beakley Woon snapped at it to stay quiet. Still confused, he suddenly realized something important. The contract had only been signed the previous day, so how had the rumors spread so quickly already? Yiriang nervously raised his teacup and tried to avoid the topic by commenting that rumors naturally travel fast. That reaction alone gave Beakley Woon the answer he needed. His expression turned cold as he accused Yiriang of spreading the story himself. Trying to defend himself, Yiriang argued that it could count as publicity for the sect. If people heard that Beakley Woon was alive and unharmed after moving into the estate, it would prove the place was safe. Instead of calming him down, the explanation only made Beakley Woon angrier. He blamed Yiriang for dragging him into ownership of a haunted estate in the first place. Later, while visiting the fabric district, Beakley Woon tried greeting merchants politely, but before he could properly explain himself, one after another refused to sell to him and slammed their doors shut. One person even threw a bowl directly at him while yelling for the cursed owner of the haunted estate to leave. Beakley Woon stood there trembling with anger, repeatedly reminding himself to stay calm and avoid looking insane during his first public impression. Just then, a commotion nearby caught his attention. A young boy was desperately holding onto a man's pant leg, refusing to let go while begging him to save his sick sister. The man, however, reacted with irritation and tried to shake the child off. At that moment, an elderly man rushed over, calling out an alarm and addressing the boy by name. He asked what had happened. The boy, Xiao Wu, immediately accused the fighters of deception, saying they had promised to heal his sister and taken all his money instead. The accused man snapped back and struck Xiao Wu across the face, harshly declaring that his sister's condition was beyond help and that even the clinics had abandoned her. Hearing this, the old man stepped forward in anger, questioning their conduct and recognizing their attire as belonging to the White Sword Sect. He criticized them for treating a child so violently. Nearby, another member of the White Sword Sect stood by and instructed his companion to resolve the matter quickly and avoid drawing attention from their sect master. With a nod of agreement, the man drew his sword and coldly stated that the boy had refused to leave earlier despite being told to go. The old man, named China Myong, stared back and asked if they truly intended to stain their hands with blood over this. Before anything further could happen, Beakley Woon suddenly intervened from behind and struck one of the men with a flying kick, knocking him to the ground. The accomplice froze in shock. He then demanded to know who Beakley Woon was. Standing between the old man and the boy, Beakley Woon calmly introduced himself as the sect master of the Righteous Heaven sect, adding that while the title was still new, respect should still be given when asked. The White Sword sect member reacted angrily, insulting his unknown sect and accusing him of interfering in their affairs. He rushed forward, but Beakley Woon sidestepped and countered in a single motion, injuring the attacker's forearm and forcing him down. As the man writhed in pain, Beakley Woon remarked that judging others purely by reputation was a mistake, especially without understanding their actual strength. Another White Sword sect member immediately charged in, threatening him and declaring that opposing their sect would have consequences. Beakley Woon simply replied that he did not know what that meant and calmly struck him down with a single punch, leaving him in the same state as the first. The remaining man, now shaken, questioned whether Beakley Woon was the one connected to the rumor about a merchant group acquiring a haunted estate under the Murim Alliance. He expressed disbelief at how far the rumor had spread. At the same time, Yiriang, sitting elsewhere, choked on his drink in shock upon hearing the situation had escalated further. Beakley Woon then pointedly remarked that because of the rumor, he had been unable to purchase the ritual robes he needed. He pressed the remaining opponent for an answer, while casually provoking him to step forward instead of hiding behind others. The man, unable to tolerate the provocation, launched himself forward and accused Beakley Woon of challenging the White Sword sect, vowing to make him pay for his arrogance. His strike came down, but Beakley Woon had already moved out of its path. Just then, the previously defeated White Sword sect member suddenly got back on his feet and rushed in to attack Beakley Woon from behind. In response, Beakley Woon quickly assessed both directions as the two opponents closed in on him at the same time. Despite the pressure, he remained composed. He reacted instantly, striking one man's face with his left elbow while delivering an upward punch into the other man's abdomen. The second attacker cried out in pain and fell to the ground. At the same time, the man's sword was driven into the ground nearby as he collapsed. Beakley Woon then addressed them firmly, stating that if they considered this a challenge, he would accept it as such. He added that he was always open to sparring and warned them to leave and not worsen the situation if they valued their condition. After forcing the White Sword Sect members to retreat, he turned to the old man and the boy and asked if they were unharmed. Shu, who had been carefully watching the fight, then spoke up and asked if Beekly Woon was looking for someone skilled in sewing ritual robes. Beekly Woon asked for clarification, and Shu explained that his sister was highly skilled at sewing and requested help for her condition in return. He then bowed deeply in gratitude. Beekly Woon quickly refused, clarifying that medical issues should be handled by a physician. At that moment, the system interface appeared again beside him, displaying new information about a potential partner ranked at Tier 3, though only Beekly Woon could see it. He reacted with mild curiosity, noting the rank and asking for more details. Shu then explained his situation in a subdued tone. Their parents had died the previous year, leaving only him and his sister. His sister's sewing skills had supported them, but recently she had developed a strange illness that caused her limbs to become painfully cold. Hearing this, Chin Gamyong let out a troubled breath, acknowledging the seriousness of a condition that made the limbs feel frozen. Beekly Woon then turned to him and respectfully asked for clarification. After a brief hesitation, Chin Gamyong revealed that he ran a small fabric shop in a nearby village and had often given work to the boy's sister. However, they had recently lost contact, which worried him. Shortly after, Shu led them quickly toward a thatched house. Upon arrival, he hesitated and looked around nervously, questioning whether the structure would even hold. Excited, he called out that he had brought a warrior who could drive away evil influences. Beekly Woon immediately corrected him, insisting that he was not such a person. Inside the house, they found Shu's sister sitting by a fire, warming her hands directly over the flames. Beekly Woon was momentarily stunned by the sight. She calmly greeted them, and when asked who she was, she responded without much concern. Beekly Woon observed the situation in silence, noting how she exposed her hands and feet to fire, yet remained composed. He concluded that her condition was likely more serious than expected. At the same time, the system issued a notice stating that the fire's heat was balancing the cold energy within her body. Beekly Woon considered whether this was related to a yin cold energy technique. After a pause, he introduced himself politely and explained that her brother had asked him to help. She identified herself simply, and Beekly Woon reacted with a quiet sigh, acknowledging the severity of her condition. Shu's sister gave a faint smile and explained that she needed to do this to prevent painful cold burns in her limbs. Still uncertain, Beekly Woon asked what she meant by cold burns. Meanwhile, Chin Gamyong stepped forward anxiously, calling out to her by name and asking what was happening. She greeted him weakly, surprised to see him there. He responded with concern, saying he had been worried after losing contact. She apologized softly, explaining that her condition had made communication difficult. At that moment, Beekly Woon urgently requested to check Sayo's pulse. She turned toward him with tired eyes and asked if he meant pulse diagnosis. He confirmed, saying he needed to examine her condition briefly. Without hesitation, she extended her hand. As soon as Beekly Woon placed a fingertip on her wrist, a surge of yin energy rushed into him. The system immediately issued a warning about excessive yin energy absorption, labeling it dangerous. Beekly Woon reacted with irritation and told it to stop alarming him unnecessarily. The system's analysis indicated that excessive yin energy had already invaded her body. Beekly Woon could also sense it instinctively, an overwhelming cold force circulating within her. After a moment of focus, he quietly said he understood her condition. Sayo reacted with hope, asking if that meant he had found a solution. He explained that her body likely had an unusual constitution that naturally attracted yin energy from the surroundings and stored it internally. He compared it to rare cases he had heard of, including the Sword Empress, the Master of the Sword Pavilion, and one of the 10 Heavens, known for her unmatched swordsmanship. Sayo listened in awe, admitting she did not fully understand but recognizing it sounded extraordinary. Beekly Woon then clarified that while such a constitution could be beneficial for martial artists, her case was different. She was absorbing too much yin energy while lacking sufficient yang energy to balance it. If the imbalance continued, her condition would become fatal within 3 months. He added that she likely already felt the effects. Unexpectedly, Sayo smiled calmly and said that if that was true, then there was no cure. She dismissed it as something beyond help. Chin Gamyong reacted immediately, suggesting the use of spirit elixirs, but Beekly Woon shook his head explaining that such remedies would only provide temporary relief and not solve the root problem. The condition would eventually worsen again. He began thinking about the core issue, how to restore stable yang energy within her body. At that moment, the system spoke directly into his mind, suggesting the use of essence to enhance recovery abilities, stamina, and inner energy regeneration. It noted the cost of activation as 50 essence and confirmed it could be used immediately. Beakley Woon felt slightly uneasy about the idea of boosting multiple internal functions at once. The system then issued a challenge task: recruit the first disciple. Hearing this, Beakley Woon paused. He realized that resolving Sayo's condition and taking on a disciple could be achieved at the same time. Without further hesitation, he spoke his conclusion and told her that he believed he had a solution. Then he extended his hand and directly asked her to become a disciple of the Righteous Heaven Sect. Sayo looked at him in confusion, asking why he was suddenly making such a request. Beakley Woon told her to trust him for now. However, she hesitated. Having never been involved in martial arts, she found the sudden offer suspicious. In her mind, she recalled how people in the martial world often spoke of righteousness while acting in self-interest, and how her own parents had died after being dragged into such conflicts. She assumed this man might also be using her situation for his own benefit. Her gaze lowered to Beakley Woon's hand, noticing visible signs of cold damage on it. This detail caused her pause. Beakley Woon looked at her steadily and made it clear that none of it mattered to him if he could save her life. In that moment, Sayo's heart began to race as she reconsidered her decision. She gave a faint, uncertain smile and accepted that she had no other option if it could truly save her. Finally, she clasped Beakley Woon's hand and asked him to take responsibility for her condition. The system immediately confirmed that the challenge task was complete and that the first disciple had been successfully recruited. It then advised that Sayo was suffering from cold burns caused by exposure to yin energy, and that essence could be used to activate recovery functions. At that moment, a wave of warmth spread through Sayo's body. She looked at her hands in shock, realizing they were slowly warming. The system indicated that her stamina and inner energy recovery rates had slightly improved. Beakley Woon observed the change and confirmed that the recovery process was working. He concentrated the spiritual energy, stabilizing her internal flow and gradually restoring balance to her yang energy. A faint sense of relief crossed his expression as he confirmed that the condition was improving. Sayo stared at her palms in disbelief, noticing the gradual return of normal sensation in her limbs. Nearby, Sayo rushed forward and embraced her tightly, calling out to her in relief. Chin Gamyong, observing the scene, asked if some form of healing technique had been used. Beakley Woon replied vaguely that it was something similar. Hearing this, the old man let out a light laugh, while Chin Gamyong expressed admiration for what he had witnessed, remarking that Beakley Woon's abilities were impressive. He added that he now understood why the Murim Alliance leader took interest in him. Beakley Woon reacted with curiosity, questioning whether the elder knew the Murim Alliance leader. By the flickering firelight, Chin Gamyong finally introduced himself properly. He revealed that he was the master of Dragon Hall, a major trading organization known for its influence and supply networks connected to the imperial court. Later that night, at the White Sword Sect, tension filled the hall as the sect master reprimanded his subordinates. He had heard that they were humiliated by an unknown sect and demanded answers. The subordinates knelt in fear and apologized repeatedly. In anger, the sect master struck one of them with a wooden board as a warning, declaring that their current suffering was insignificant compared to what was coming. He then ordered the rest to be taken to the punishment chamber despite their pleas for mercy. Even as they begged for forgiveness, his decision remained unchanged. Turning away coldly, he spoke of Beakley Woon and the Righteous Heaven Sect, stating that they would prepare a proper response for this humiliation. Meanwhile, Beakley Woon remained silent after hearing Chin Gamyong's true identity, realizing he was speaking to the master of Dragon Hall. He acknowledged that such a figure was far from ordinary. Sayo quickly bowed in apology for her earlier behavior, but Chin Gamyong dismissed her concerns casually. He then turned to Beakley Woon and extended an offer. He proposed that Beakley Woon join Dragon Hall, promising full support for whatever he wished to pursue. Beakley Woon remained calm and expressionless as he considered the offer, aware that Dragon Hall was a powerful merchant consortium supplying the imperial court with valuable goods. At that moment, the system updated with new information, identifying a Tier 1 lead connected to Dragon Hall. From Beakley Woon's understanding, Dragon Hall was a gathering point for countless experts, influential enough that even major sects would treat it cautiously. Its master held authority capable of influencing both orthodox and unorthodox factions within the Murim world. After evaluating the situation, Beakley Woon still hesitated. Although the opportunity was valuable, it did not align with the future he envisioned. After a brief pause, he calmly declined the offer, expressing gratitude but stating that he had already taken on his first disciple and could not accept. Shin Gamyeong was clearly displeased by the refusal and questioned whether Beakley Woon understood what it meant to reject Dragon Hall. Beakley Woon replied without hesitation, acknowledging the offer but instead proposing a partnership. He suggested that if cooperation was possible, he would build a reputation worthy of Dragon Hall's name. This response offended Shin Gamyeong, who felt the young sect master was being arrogant. He mocked the idea that an unestablished sect could bring honor to such a large organization. Beakley Woon remained steady and unfazed. He clarified that within 10 years, he intended to grow his sect into a force that could stand alongside the top orthodox sects and rival the unorthodox factions. Hearing this, Shin Gamyeong dismissed it as unrealistic and laughed at the bold claim. However, Beakley Woon did not back down. He explained that the reputation he spoke of was not for Dragon Hall itself, but for the alliance he intended to build. His seriousness caused Shin Gamyeong to stop laughing and regard him more carefully. He asked directly what Beakley Woon truly wanted in return. Beakley Woon stated his condition clearly. What he sought was access to Dragon Hall's future resources and support, specifically a disciple exchange to build long-term ties. After considering this, Shin Gamyeong agreed. He decided to send one of his disciples to the Righteous Heavens sect, noting that whether a genuine connection formed would depend on the disciple herself. Before departing, he issued a warning that if the sect ever acted against Dragon Hall's expectations, consequences would follow. His presence briefly carried an overwhelming pressure meant as a reminder of his authority. Beakley Woon met the pressure calmly, refusing to yield. The negotiation ended with mutual acknowledgement of the agreement. Shin Gamyeong then ordered his attendants to bring out brocades, presenting them as a deposit and reward for the day's dealings, insisting they not be refused. Beakley Woon accepted the gift after a brief calculation of its value, noting that it was substantial. Sayo also expressed quiet satisfaction at the outcome. After the meeting ended, Shin Gamyeong departed with his entourage. As he rode away, he reflected that Beakley Woon's confidence reminded him of his own younger days, though he still considered it reckless. He then ordered his carriage to head toward the unorthodox alliance to meet an old acquaintance. The next morning, Sayo presented Beakley Woon with a newly completed outfit. As he wore it, the system displayed improvements to merit, prestige, and influence. Beakley Woon examined the garment, noting its quality and comfort, and expressed satisfaction with the craftsmanship. Sayo responded with a pleased smile. At that moment, the system issued a reward notification for the successfully crafted outfit, offering several options including a high-tier unbinding manual, a high-tier talent elixir, and an option to unlock an innate trait. After considering the choices, Beakley Woon selected the innate trait unlock. The system confirmed the decision, stating that from that point onward, he would be able to unlock the traits of his disciples. She was 17 years old and possessed an extreme constitution with extraordinary martial potential. However, due to her long illness and inactivity, her physical condition had weakened significantly. Her listed traits included diligence, adversity, and responsibility. The system also warned that her inner power was still too weak to unlock any traits at the moment. Beakley Woon carefully read through the information while muttering each listed trait to himself in confusion. When he attempted to select one, the system explained that disciples first needed to grow stronger and level up before their traits could be unlocked. The explanation immediately irritated him, and he complained inwardly about the unfair restriction. As he stared at Sayoa while thinking deeply about it, she became visibly flustered under his gaze. Meanwhile, Beakley Woon silently decided that he would simply help her grow stronger as quickly as possible so her traits could eventually be unlocked. Without wasting time, he immediately announced that formal training would begin. The sudden declaration made Sayoa nervous. She began doubting herself, wondering whether someone with no martial arts experience could truly learn properly. She worried that she might disappoint him despite all the help he had already given her. Then she remembered the reassurance he had offered during their first meeting, when he calmly told her that everything would be fine as long as he could heal her. Remembering those words, Sayoa finally steadied herself and decided to trust him completely. She then nervously asked what martial art she would learn first. A short while later, she followed his instructions and assumed a training stance. Baek Lee-woon explained that the technique was the horse stance, a basic foundational exercise used to strengthen the body. Seeing such a simple exercise, Sayoa looked slightly disappointed and admitted she had expected something more impressive. Baek Lee-woon calmly explained that restoring her weakened body came before everything else. Right now, proper conditioning was far more important than flashy martial techniques. When Sayoa timidly asked how long she needed to maintain the stance, Baek Lee-woon casually replied that the goal was 30 minutes. Hearing that, she stared at him in disbelief. Ignoring her reaction, Baek Lee-woon immediately ordered the training to begin. Time slowly passed in silence, while Sayoa struggled to endure the exercise. Eventually, unable to hold back her doubts anymore, she quietly asked whether someone completely inexperienced like her could truly become a martial artist. Baek Lee-woon answered without hesitation. Of course she could. After all, an extreme Yin constitution was a body naturally capable of accumulating immense inner power. Baek Lee-woon explained that although an extreme Yin constitution naturally leaned toward Yin energy, everything would change once a Dantian fully formed. At that point, the accumulated energy could properly circulate and stabilize within the body. After explaining this to Sayoa, he quietly fell into thought. Someone born with an extreme Yin constitution could push Yin energy to extraordinary heights. To him, a disciple with such natural martial talent was an opportunity he absolutely could not overlook. At that moment, the system displayed another notification praising his judgment and informing him that his insight stat had increased. Before he could think further, loud noises suddenly came from outside. Moments later, Yiriang burst in while loudly calling for Baek Lee-woon. Without wasting time, he shoved a scroll into his hands and explained that it had come from White Sword's Sect. The moment Sayoa heard the name, she immediately reacted with anger, clearly remembering the incident from the previous day. Seeing her expression, Baek Lee-woon finally connected the situation to the group he had fought earlier. Curious, he opened the scroll and read its contents. The letter announced that White Sword Sect would soon hold a grand martial contest and formally invited the Righteous Heaven Sect to participate. Yiriang then explained the situation further. White Sword Sect was the dominant sect in the region, and its sect master was infamous for his harsh personality. According to rumors, he often used martial contests as excuses to pressure weaker sects or force smaller organizations into submission. Even Yiriang found the situation strange because White Sword Sect normally targeted sects with at least some reputation or influence. The Righteous Heaven Sect was still almost unknown. The moment he casually referred to the sect as insignificant, Baek Lee-woon, Sayoa, and Shu all immediately glared at him at the same time. Caught off guard, Yiriang quickly panicked and tried to explain that he meant no offense. Meanwhile, Baek Lee-woon remained calm while analyzing the invitation. From what Yiriang described, he concluded that White Sword Sect likely intended to pressure the newly established Righteous Heaven Sect before it could gain momentum. Instead of worrying, however, Baek Lee-woon actually found the situation interesting. To him, this could become the perfect chance to spread the name of the Righteous Heaven Sect. Unlike his relaxed attitude, Sayoa felt deeply anxious. She worried that with a sect consisting of only 2 people, she might only become a burden to him during the contest. Baek Lee-woon looked surprised by her concern and clarified that the participant would be the chief disciple, meaning she alone would represent the sect. Hearing that, Sayoa immediately steeled herself and declared that she would simply train even harder. A second later, the reality of what she had just agreed to finally hit her, and she shouted in disbelief after realizing she would truly be competing alone. From that day onward, Sayoa trained relentlessly from morning until night. By evening, she would collapse onto the floor, completely exhausted and struggling to breathe. Even while enduring the harsh training, she could not stop questioning Baek Lee-woon's methods. Throughout the day, he only made her practice the horse stance repeatedly, while endlessly repeating a simple downward sword strike that even children could imitate. With the Grand Martial Contest less than 2 weeks away, Sayoa became increasingly worried about what Baek Lee-woon was actually planning. Yet every time she remembered his calm expression and reassuring smile, telling her not to worry, she found herself regaining confidence. Eventually, unable to hold back her curiosity any longer, Sayoa forced herself back on her feet and decided she would directly ask Beakley Woon about his true intentions. Seeing lights still coming from Beakley Woon's room late at night, Sayoa felt relieved that he had not gone to sleep yet. As she quietly approached, she noticed something unexpected. Softly calling for the Sect Master, she soon realized that Beakley Woon was completely absorbed in talking to himself and had not noticed her standing there. In reality, he was complaining to the system while struggling to sew clothing by hand. Every few moments, the needle pricked his fingers, causing the system to repeatedly display messages mocking his self-inflicted injuries. By then, it had already announced the same warning more than 20 times. Annoyed by the constant notifications, Beakley Woon muttered for the system to stay quiet while continuing his work. At the same time, he worried that Sayoa might already be questioning the repetitive horse stance training. Even so, he remained focused on finishing the outfit he was making for her, secretly hoping she would like it. Watching the scene silently from outside, Sayoa quietly stepped away without letting him know she had seen everything. At that exact moment, the system informed Beakley Woon that Sayoa's responsibility trait was beginning to awaken, which caught him completely off guard. Soon, the day of the grand martial contest hosted by White Sword Sect finally arrived. The streets around the venue were crowded with noisy spectators and martial artists from many sections. Near the registration area, a young man chatted casually with Wong Pao about why the Sect Master had suddenly organized such a large contest instead of simply arranging a normal duel with the Righteous Heaven Sect. Wong Pao vaguely explained that rumors claimed members of White Sword Sect had recently been defeated. According to him, the contest was likely intended to remind smaller sects what would happen if they opposed White Sword Sect. Both men briefly recalled the humiliating image of their sect master being disgraced, which only deepened their resentment. The young man mocked the unknown sect for foolishly challenging people far beyond their level. At that moment, Sayoa and Beakley Woon approached the registration table. Sayoa politely asked where she should sign, and the young man immediately pointed it out while secretly staring at her appearance in surprise. He even wondered to himself whether the Righteous Heaven Sect recruited disciples based solely on looks because she was unexpectedly beautiful. Sayoa calmly wrote down her name while Beakley Woon stood quietly beside her. Neither of them offered any additional explanation before leaving the table. After they walked away, the young man quietly commented on how strange Sayoa's outfit looked. Although he tried saying it under his breath, both Sayoa and Beakley Woon still heard him clearly. Beakley Woon immediately looked embarrassed, while Sayoa covered her mouth to hide her laughter. Trying to ease the awkwardness, he nervously asked whether she truly liked the outfit. Sayoa honestly admitted that the stitching was somewhat clumsy, but she still genuinely liked it. Once all the participants had gathered, So Yoing stepped on the main platform and officially announced the opening of the White Sword Martial Contest. He declared that the event existed not only to strengthen ties between righteous sects, but also to serve as a stage for the younger generation of martial artists. To further excite the crowd, he revealed that a special reward had been prepared for the victor. With a signal from So Yoing, an attendant opened a treasure box beside the platform. The moment the contents became visible, the entire crowd reacted in shock. Inside was the little azure pill. The system immediately explained to Beakley Woon that the little azure pill was one of the rare spirit pills created by the Orthodox Pill Sect. It could strengthen the blood and chi while greatly assisting in the formation of a dantian. When So Yoing officially announced that the winner of the contest would receive the pill, excitement instantly spread through the crowd. Many people praised the White Sword Sect Master for his generosity. However, after stepping down from the platform, So Yoing's expression immediately darkened. When two disciples approached to report that the tournament brackets had been prepared, he coldly insulted them before revealing his true intention. In his mind, this contest was never about friendship or unity. He intended to use overwhelming power to crush the Righteous Heaven Sect publicly and ensure they never dared oppose White Sword Sect again. As his disciples listened to his cruel plans, they immediately obeyed without question. Soon, the crowd gathered around the arena as the third regional qualifying round of the contest was about to begin. At that moment, Sayoa was extremely nervous. Her hands trembled slightly as she asked Beakley Woon whether she would truly be able to perform well. Beakley Woon calmly told her to remember everything she had gone through during training. Still uncertain, Sayoa reminded him that most of her training had only consisted of practicing the horse stance. Beakley Woon reassured her once again, telling her to trust the person who had trained her. He confidently explained that she had already become far stronger than before, even if she did not realize it herself yet. Although his answer sounded somewhat casual, Sayoa still chose to believe him. She steadied herself and resolved to do her absolute best no matter what happened. Gripping her sword tightly, she slowly stepped onto the arena. Meanwhile, Beakley Woon remained completely confident because he could already sense the tremendous hidden strength inside her body. Soon, the referee officially announced the beginning of the third qualifying round. Her opponent, Chung Sam, introduced himself as the third senior disciple of the Blue Moon Sect. Sayoa calmly responded by introducing herself as a disciple of the Righteous Heaven Sect. The moment Chung Sam looked at her properly, he immediately mocked her. To him, she looked like someone who had barely learned how to hold a sword. Rather than denying it, Sayoa honestly admitted that she had only trained for about a month. Hearing that, Chung Sam became even more arrogant and looked down on her completely. He could not understand how someone so inexperienced dared to stand in the arena. Then the referee signaled for the match to begin. The instant the command was given, Sayoa moved first before Chung Sam could even finish speaking. Remembering Beakley Woon's teachings, she attacked immediately with all her strength and drove her sword directly into Chung Sam's abdomen. The sudden strike caught him entirely off guard, leaving him unable to defend himself. With a cry of pain, Chung Sam was sent flying backward from a single blow. The entire arena fell silent in shock. Everything had happened so quickly that even the referee froze for a moment in disbelief. Around the arena, the spectators struggled to accept that the match had been decided by one clean strike. Meanwhile, Beakley Woon calmly reminded himself that he had told Sayoa to trust him. Recovering from the shock, the referee quickly declared Sayoa of the Righteous Heaven Sect as the winner. Hearing the result, Sayoa became visibly excited. Looking toward the stands, she saw Beakley Woon giving her a confident thumbs up. Watching her victory, Beakley Woon reflected on the true purpose of her training over the past 2 weeks. More than techniques, he had taught her the mentality required of a martial artist. Afterward, all of Sayoa's remaining matches progressed just as smoothly. Beakley Woon understood something most people overlooked. Striking with full force was actually difficult for beginners because inexperienced fighters usually hesitated out of fear of seriously injuring others. Sayoa, however, was different. Once she attacked, she committed fully without hesitation. Because of that mindset, nearly all of her matches ended in 1 or 2 swift surprise attacks before her opponents could properly react. After another victory, Sayoa happily rushed back to report her success to Beakley Woon. Standing below the arena, he quietly thought that she would likely advance through the main rounds without much trouble. Feeling relieved about her progress, he finally turned his attention toward the other arenas to observe the remaining competitors. At that moment, a referee loudly announced the entrance of a White Sword Sect disciple. The surrounding crowd immediately focused their attention on a nearby arena. There, Jing Guang from White Sword Sect was already overwhelming his opponent with relentless attacks. The other fighters struggled desperately just to keep up and repeatedly begged for a moment to recover. Jing Guang ignored him completely. Eventually, the battered opponent finally surrendered, admitting defeat outright. However, Jing Guang did not stop attacking even after the surrender. Perhaps because he had become too absorbed in the fight, a dangerous aura began rising from him as he prepared another strike. Realizing something was wrong, the defeated fighter screamed in fear and begged him to stop. Even so, Jing Guang still swung his sword down mercilessly and struck the man directly in the face. The referee immediately rushed forward and shouted for him to stop because the match had already ended, but it was already too late. The defeated fighter lost several teeth from the blow before collapsing unconscious onto the arena floor. The referee officially declared Jing Guang of the White Sword Sect as the winner. Hearing the result, Jing Guang only clicked his tongue in irritation, as though the outcome had still disappointed him. Watching from a distance, Beakley Woon silently judged him. The boy had already dominated the match from the beginning, yet still resorted to cruel and unnecessary attacks. To Beakley Woon, Jing Guang seemed like an especially unpleasant person. Not long afterward, Sayoa happily ran over and excitedly announced that she had successfully advanced into the main rounds. Beakley Woon immediately congratulated her, and Sayoa proudly explained that she had followed his instructions exactly, attacking with full commitment and winning far more easily than expected. Seeing her confidence grow, Beak Lee-woon quietly felt satisfied that his teaching methods had worked. However, while talking, Sayoa suddenly felt uncomfortable as she looked toward Jingguang. She could sense a heavy, killing intent coming from him, which made her uneasy. Curious about Beak Lee-woon's opinion, she asked him to predict how strong Jingguang truly was, since there was a high chance they would eventually face each other in the main rounds. Before he could answer, another voice interrupted them. Turning around, they discovered So Yoing standing behind them. The White Sword Sect master congratulated Sayoa for reaching the main rounds and casually brought up the previous conflict involving his disciples. Beak Lee-woon calmly responded that perhaps White Sword Sect needed stricter disciple training instead. Ignoring the remark, So Yoing casually patted Sayoa on the shoulder and praised her talent. However, he also remarked that her next opponent would likely be Wu Jie, implying that her journey in the tournament would probably end there. Then, with a smile hiding his true intentions, So Yoing suggested that Sayoa could always join White Sword Sect instead if she wished. The moment he attempted to recruit her openly, Beak Lee-woon brushed his hand away and stepped in front of Sayoa protectively. He thanked So Yoing for acknowledging her ability, while also commenting that White Sword Sect disciples certainly displayed some skill themselves. So Yoing's expression stiffened slightly at this subtle provocation. Soon after, he called for Wang Pao. Wang Pao quickly arrived and respectfully responded to his sect master summons. So Yoing then ordered him to escort Beak Lee-woon and Sayoa to their guest chambers. After receiving the order, Wang Pao politely introduced himself as a first-rank disciple of White Sword Sect and guided them toward the resting area. At that moment, the system displayed information about him to Beak Lee-woon. Wang Pao was 21 years old and possessed exceptional talent, particularly in quickly understanding and mastering martial techniques. As Wang Pao led them onward, Beak Lee-woon suddenly appeared beside him and casually praised his physique, foundation, and natural build. The unexpected compliment caught Wang Pao completely off guard. Embarrassed, he awkwardly thanked him while stiffening nervously under the attention. Eventually, Wang Pao showed them their assigned guest room and politely wished them a comfortable stay before leaving. The moment he was gone, Sayoa immediately tried bringing up concerns about her next opponent again. However, Beak Lee-woon suddenly changed the topic and asked what she thought about Wang Pao instead. He even casually suggested that Wang Pao might someday become her junior brother within the Righteous Heaven sect. The abrupt shift in conversation completely confused Sayoa. Meanwhile, elsewhere in White Sword Sect, memories from Wang Pao's past resurfaced. Years earlier, So Yoing had personally praised Wang Pao's physique, strength, and talent before accepting him as a disciple of White Sword Sect. At the time, Wang Pao had been overwhelmed with gratitude and admiration toward his sect master. Later, during a training session, Wang Pao was suddenly defeated by Jingguang, despite being 3 years older and more experienced. The surrounding disciples loudly praised Jingguang's overwhelming talent, while Wang Pao could only protest weakly that it had merely been training, and there had been no reason to attack so seriously. Watching the scene, So Yoing coldly turned away in disappointment, dismissing Wang Pao as nothing more than a weak disappointment. He reminded Wang Pao that his role was to dedicate himself entirely to supporting his junior brothers. Those harsh words deeply affected Wang Pao. Suddenly waking from sleep, Wang Pao realized he had been reliving those memories in a dream. Confused, he rubbed his eyes and wondered why such memories had resurfaced now. At that moment, Jingguang entered the room and greeted him casually, causing Wang Pao to look up in surprise. Wang Pao looked surprised to see Jingguang appear before him and immediately asked why he had come. Jingguang casually explained that he wanted to warm up before the upcoming matches. Already exhausted, Wang Pao apologized and admitted that he was not feeling well enough to continue training. Jingguang showed no concern at all. To him, Wang Pao's condition was irrelevant. What mattered was satisfying his own needs. He coldly mocked Wang Pao's large physique, saying that such a body should at least be useful during training. After Jingguang left, Wang Pao sat alone in silence, gloomily blaming himself once again. Time passed, and soon the day of the semifinals arrived. Before the match, Sayoa carefully discussed her opponent's swordsmanship with Beak Lee-woon. Wu Jie specialized in illusion sword techniques that made it difficult to predict where the real attack would come from. However, Sayoa also understood that illusion techniques relied heavily on finesse, meaning flaws would appear if the user failed to maintain precision. Beak Li-woon then asked how one should deal with illusion swords. Sayoa answered that the key was avoiding deception. He agreed, but explained that, at her current level, there was actually a much simpler solution. He calmly outlined his strategy and instructed her to follow it exactly. Although confused at first, Sayoa eventually accepted his guidance after Beak Li-woon confidently assured her that she would definitely win if she trusted him. Nearby, Yiriang remarked in surprise that Sayoa had already reached the semi-finals after training for only a month. He congratulated Beak Li-woon for raising her this far so quickly. Clearly pleased with himself, Beak Li-woon simply replied that congratulations could wait until after the finals, because he intended to win the entire tournament. Yiriang stared at him in disbelief and asked whether he was truly serious. Soon afterward, the semi-final match began. Standing in the arena, Wu Jai mocked Sayoa openly. He admitted she had advanced far, but insisted that luck alone could not carry her any further. According to him, everyone present expected her defeat. Sayoa answered confidently that at least one person believed in her victory completely, her Sect master. Wu Jai burst into laughter, calling both master and disciple equally crazy. The referee then officially started the match. Sayoa immediately rushed forward and declared that she would be today's victor. Wu Jai reacted instantly and skillfully blocked her first strike. Even while fighting, he remained arrogant and believed disciples of White Sword Sect existed on a completely different level from ordinary martial artists. Soon after, Wu Jai's illusion techniques began pressuring Sayoa heavily. Unable to tell which attacks were real and which were feints, she gradually became overwhelmed. Her expression slowly filled with panic as she struggled to follow his movements. Maintaining constant pressure, Wu Jai struck her again and sent her stumbling backward. When she managed to block another attack, he mockingly praised her before unveiling a new technique. As he moved, he scattered streams of strange purple liquid throughout the arena. The moment the liquid approached her, Sayoa remembered Beak Li-woon's instructions. Illusion sword users were often weak in close combat, which meant Wu Jai would naturally try to maintain distance. Her goal was simple: close the gap and land even a single clean strike. With that thought in mind, Sayoa charged forward directly toward him. Wu Jai confidently manipulated the streams of purple liquid toward her while believing her movements were completely predictable. Even so, Sayoa forced herself onward and endured one of his attacks directly. Watching from the sidelines, both Yiriang and Beak Li-woon observed the situation carefully. Yiriang looked tense, while Beak Li-woon merely narrowed his eyes silently, his expression unreadable. Eventually, Sayoa collapsed onto the arena floor. Seeing her down, Wu Jai smugly declared himself the winner. He looked at her with both contempt and disappointment, believing she had finally reached her limit. However, while regulating her breathing on the ground, Sayoa suddenly shouted that the match was not over yet. To everyone's surprise, she rose back to her feet almost immediately. Wu Jai demanded to know what she still intended to do in her weakened state. At that moment, Sayoa suddenly felt her determination surge again. She dashed forward at incredible speed, while Wu Jai stood confidently, convinced he still had complete control of the match. Declaring that she would finish everything with one final move, Sayoa closed the distance instantly. Before anyone could properly react, Wu Jai was suddenly sent flying backward. Yiriang immediately shouted in excitement that they had won. However, some White Sword Sect disciples instantly protested, accusing Sayoa of pretending to be defeated before launching a surprise attack. They loudly claimed the victory was unfair. Beak Li-woon calmly dismissed the complaints and questioned whether White Sword Sect intended to act so petty over a legitimate match. One disciple became so emotional that he even began challenging Beak Li-woon directly, but So Yoing immediately stepped in and apologized for his disciple's disrespect toward another sect master. Beak Li-woon accepted the apology calmly. Even then, So Yoing continued speaking, insisting that the true problem was that everyone had simply assumed Sayoa was already defeated before the match had actually ended. White Sword Sect ultimately acknowledged defeat in the semi-final duel, and the referee officially declared Sayoa of the Righteous Heaven Sect the winner while confirming the loss of the White Sword Sect disciple. Overjoyed, Sayoa immediately ran to Beak Li-woon and excitedly announced her victory. Beak Li-woon calmly praised her performance and joked that Yiriang would be paying for everyone's meal that night. Watching the scene from afar, Wang Pao quietly turned away and left in silence. As he passed by, So Yoing suddenly ordered him to secretly poison Sayoa's food so she would be paralyzed before tomorrow's final match. He also instructed Jingguang to completely destroy her during the duel, even if it meant crippling her arms and legs. Wang Pao hesitated at the order, unable to respond immediately. Seeing that hesitation, So Yoing slapped him across the face and angrily insulted him. According to him, if Wang Pao lacked talent, then the least he could do was learn to obey intelligently. He even mocked Wang Pao for being surpassed by his younger disciple. At that moment, Beakley Woon suddenly appeared nearby and sarcastically remarked that White Sword Sect certainly trained its disciples harshly. Hearing the comment, So Yoing stopped and coldly accused Beakley Woon of interfering in another sect's affairs. Beakley Woon calmly replied that regardless of the situation, treating a disciple so cruelly was excessive. So Yoing responded that even weak disciples were still the responsibility of their sect master and should be guided rather than abandoned. He then reminded Beakley Woon that this matter did not concern him and suggested he leave instead. Before the conversation could end, Wang Pao unexpectedly begged to be accepted into the Righteous Heaven sect instead. Both Beakley Woon and Wang Pao himself were shocked by the sudden statement. Beakley Woon explained that compared to White Sword Sect, the methods and atmosphere of the Righteous Heaven sect seemed far better suited for Wang Pao. The suggestion immediately angered So Yoing, who accused Wang Pao of already becoming attached to the opposing sect. Wang Pao desperately denied it, but So Yoing no longer cared. Instead, he proposed a wager. According to So Yoing, Sayoa possessed too much talent to remain in a small sect like the Righteous Heaven sect. He claimed that if she stayed there, her abilities would eventually go to waste. He then proposed that whichever sect lost the tournament final would hand over one disciple to the winning side. Beakley Woon accepted the wager without hesitation. Wang Pao immediately panicked and begged them to stop, but So Yoing ignored him completely. Before leaving, he coldly warned Beakley Woon to prepare for losing his only disciple soon. Afterward, Beakley Woon privately asked Wang Pao why he believed he had been chosen in the first place, and told him to think carefully about where he truly wanted to belong. Meanwhile, Sayoa also learned about the wager. Beakley Woon explained that having Wang Pao join them would likely make a good addition to the sect, and that leaving such talent wasted in White Sword Sect would be unfortunate. Even so, he gently asked Sayoa whether she believed she could truly win the final match. Sayoa hesitated slightly. She admitted she would do her best, though she remembered him previously saying the odds were only 50-50. Beakley Woon acknowledged that, but reassured her that he genuinely believed she could win. Seeing the confidence in his eyes, Sayoa gradually regained her own determination and promised to fight with everything she had. Elsewhere, So Yoing was also giving strict instructions to his disciples. He ordered them not to embarrass White Sword Sect again and demanded victory at all costs. The disciples loudly accepted the command. Wang Pao also quietly warned Jingguang not to underestimate Sayoa. Jingguang dismissed the warning confidently. According to him, he would never make the same mistakes as Wu Jai, and he believed Wang Pao was placing far too much faith in Sayoa's luck. He arrogantly declared that he would crush those hopes completely. Soon, the referee called both finalists into the arena. Even before the match began, Jingguang continued mocking Sayoa, admitting she had done well to reach the finals, but insisting that her luck would end there. Sayoa immediately answered back, saying no one yet knew who would truly fall in the arena. The referee then officially started the match. Jingguang initially assumed Sayoa would avoid direct confrontation and rely on surprise attacks again due to her apparent lack of experience. Instead, she immediately charged straight toward him head-on. To Jingguang's surprise, Sayoa landed a direct strike against him almost instantly. At that moment, Jingguang realized her inner power was far stronger than he had expected. Meanwhile, Sayoa remembered Beakley Woon's earlier advice. Her opponents naturally assumed her inner power was weak because she appeared inexperienced, but they failed to consider the overwhelming reserves granted by her extreme constitution. Knowing she would only get one true opportunity, Sayoa leaped high into the air and aimed for a decisive strike. However, Jingguang reacted quickly and narrowly avoided the attack. The moment he closed the distance, he countered with a powerful punch that sent Sayoa flying several meters away. Although he admitted her inner power was impressive, Jingguang still looked down on her as nothing more than an inexperienced novice. Without giving her time to recover, he launched a relentless barrage of attacks. As Sayoa struggled to block the assault, she realized just how strong Jing Guang truly was. Completely confident in his superiority, Jing Guang declared that he would finish the match within 10 seconds. Even under heavy pressure, Sayoa refused to retreat. She gripped her sword tightly and forced herself forward once again, determined not to lose the trust Beakley Woon had placed in her. At that critical moment, the system suddenly activated Sayoa's responsibility trait. Her three temperaments, balance, adversity, and responsibility, merged together with responsibility at the center. As a result, the inherited trait clear reflection like water was unlocked, greatly enhancing her judgment and awareness in extreme situations. Sensing an opportunity, Sayoa prepared to counterattack. However, Jing Guang immediately crushed her move and overwhelmed her before she could properly react. In the next instant, the weapon in her hands was knocked away and seized by Jing Guang himself. Confident that victory was finally secured, he praised her for enduring this long, while questioning whether she could survive his next strike. Faced with the overwhelming attack rushing toward her, Sayoa could only stare in shock. Below the arena, Beakley Woon urgently called out to her. Right before the attack landed, Sayoa suddenly remembered the unwavering trust Beakley Woon had placed in her. At that moment, the hidden power inside her erupted violently. Dust exploded across the arena as a wave of cold energy burst outward, instantly sending Jing Guang flying several meters away. Watching the sudden reversal, both Beakley Woon and Yiriang could not hide their surprise. Even so, Yoing reacted in shock after recognizing the power as cold chi cultivation. Streams of cold chi now wrapped around Sayoa's arms, spreading freezing energy with every movement she made. Even she herself seemed surprised by the sudden chill surrounding her body. Realizing the match had effectively ended, Beakley Woon immediately climbed onto the arena platform, only to be stopped by the referee, who reminded him that outsiders could not interfere during a duel. Beakley Woon angrily pointed out that the outcome was already obvious. The referee hesitated briefly while looking at Jing Guang writhing on the ground in pain before finally announcing Sayoa as the winner. Hearing the result, both master and disciple looked at each other and smiled proudly. Meanwhile, So Yoing exploded with anger, furious that White Sword Sect had been humiliated again. Beakley Woon gently helped Sayoa stand and asked whether she was all right. Despite her exhaustion, she happily reminded him that she had kept her promise. Beakley Woon could only smile softly at her determination. Around them, the crowd began openly praising the fight and congratulating Sayoa for her victory. The referee then officially raised her hand and declared Sayoa of the Righteous Heaven Sect the champion of the White Sword Martial Contest. As the cheers continued, Beakley Woon took the opportunity to address the crowd personally. He formally announced that the Righteous Heaven Sect would hold its founding ceremony 1 month later and respectfully invited everyone present to attend the celebration. The spectators immediately reacted in surprise after realizing the sect had not even officially held its founding ceremony yet. The fact that White Sword Sect had lost to such a newly established sect shocked many people. Hearing the crowd's reactions only enraged So Yoing further. He accused Beakley Woon of using White Sword Sect's reputation to elevate the prestige of the Righteous Heaven Sect ceremony. He also accused him of deliberately concealing Sayoa's cold chi cultivation in order to deceive everyone. As So Yoing prepared to attack Beakley Woon directly, Wang Pao hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Furious, So Yoing demanded to know why Wang Pao was interfering. Wang Pao calmly warned him to preserve his dignity as a sect master. That response only made So Yoing even angrier. Declaring Wang Pao a traitor for defending the Righteous Heaven Sect, he immediately moved to attack him. At once, Beakley Woon stepped protectively in front of Wang Pao and confronted So Yoing directly. He firmly declared that Wang Pao now belonged to the Righteous Heaven Sect and warned So Yoing not to casually touch his disciple. Beakley Woon then calmly added that if So Yoing refused to accept the result of the duel, he would personally accept a challenge instead. Before anyone could react, Beakley Woon suddenly grabbed and twisted So Yoing's wrist, causing the White Sword Sect master to cry out in pain.